Welcome to CARE's June Power Panel. My name is LaDarian Gillette. I'm the Senior Program Manager at CARE USA for the U.S. Programs team. I want to give you all a little bit of background before we get started. The CARE Power Panel brings together leading voices and stakeholders on a monthly basis to discuss challenges, trends, and solutions in gender, social, racial equity, and emergency response. Our series amplifies women's voices as CARE's focus on eliminating gender inequities. So a few quick notes before we dive into today's dynamic panel. First, the Power Panel is a product of CARE Global Innovation Hub, led by the U.S. Programs team. The hub serves as an incubation space and convenes people and organizations dedicated to defeating poverty by achieving social justice. We use the hub to bring the best of CARE's global solutions to our arena and explore how they can be effectively applied domestically. So now on to today's conversation. Partnerships between nonprofits, government, and the private sector can be vital for disaster response and recovery. They can help communities by combining resources such as information, expertise, funding, emergency response plans, and infrastructure to provide a more comprehensive and coordinated response. As climate change continues, environmental disasters continue striking without warning, leaving people injured and without safe homes, food, or water. Organizations specializing in disaster response and recovery take a leadership role in coordinating community-level responses to offer timely support to survivors across the continuum, from immediate response to long-term recovery. This includes access to shelter, food and water, and health services. Building partnerships can be a hurdle for many cities and states, but we are lucky enough to be in a city that has made great strides in strengthening partnerships that impact community resilience. So this brings us to today's conversation. Today we highlight 4 amazing panelists who are working in the city of Houston to respond to natural disasters. So first we have Gabrielle Dirden. She serves as Deputy Director on CARE's U.S. Programs team. She has a primary focus on leading the CARE Package Emergency Response Program, CARE Partner Network, Community Trust Savings Program, and supports the Executive Director, Amir Farouki, with strategic planning and fundraising efforts. Through her work on this team, she maintains collaborative relationships between CARE and their community partners across the U.S. with a keen interest in the Gulf Coast region and Puerto Rico. Next, we have Nicole Milton. She earned her Bachelor of Science degree in Biology from Prairie View A&M University and a Master of Science degree from Michigan State University. She became an 8th and 6th grade science teacher and fell in love with educating young people and remains a lifelong advocate of educational equity and access for all. Nicole moved from direct instruction to professional coaching and training, program management, and content development. In her current work as a training manager for Mental Health America of Greater Houston, she utilizes her science background and teaching skill set to design and facilitate adult learning experiences around topics of mental health. Next, we have Rhonda Sepulveda. Is a 6th-generation Texan, native Houstonian, and a dynamic community resource as a natural networker and connector. She has spent much of her career at Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of Galveston, Houston, where she currently serves as its parish and government relations coordinator. She has testified at state senatorial and congressional sessions, worked with legislators, clergy, social workers, parish social ministers, and key civic leaders to promote systemic change on legislation that benefits the community and its constituents. And then last but not least, we have Ryan Morgan. He is a dedicated and experienced 20-year U.S. Coast Guard veteran. As a crisis management and maritime safety and security professional, he has had an exemplary career in the operational execution of numerous complex and multi-jurisdictional missions. That is a lot. Today is the National Director of Disaster Response for SBP. Ryan is tasked with navigating a more frequent and increasingly severe disaster landscape, connecting impacted communities to SBP's disaster recovery and rebuilding suite of services to effectively shrink the time from disaster to recovery. So, with that being said, please join me in welcoming our panelists. All right, so we always like to kick things off on a more lighter note before we get into the deep questions. So I want to ask each of you to tell us a little bit more about the communities that you call home and the communities that you serve as well. So I'll go ahead and kick us off. I'm originally from Indiana, so I'm a Midwesterner at heart. I live in Atlanta, so also the South is a little bit of home for me, and I attended Spelman College. So I have an affinity for HBCUs.
Hello, okay.
As well as the Black community and women in particular. So I'm going to pass off to Nicole and we can go right now.
So swift, you came to me. Definitely a part of the Houston community. It's large, it's rich, it's diverse. So I think growing up in Houston and even experiencing some of the Midwest, I'm just a part of the community where people want to be better and do better, right? We want to reach out, we want to make sure we're helping folks out. So that's really where my community is. Wherever I am, I'm going to find the best people, and they're going to find me. That's right. Yeah, so just a community of people striving to do better.
Well, I'm Rhonda Sepulveda, and it's an honor and a pleasure to be here with all of you. And welcome, if you're not from Houston, welcome to Houston. I am a native Houstonian, so I was born here, raised here, and I was born in the second ward, in the north side, and live in second ward, which is now called Edo. And so that's where everybody
East downtown.
East downtown. And just across the freeway from my neighborhood is Third Ward, which is an African American community. And so I've led a board of directors in the Third Ward, but we are diverse. We are a big small town. So if somebody knows you, they know somebody that knows you. And that holds true for all of us. And so we work well with our public officials, and we collaborate, right, Danielle? And some of our arenas, and with refugee resettlement is a big deal. But it's I can't wait to share a little bit more about what Catholic Charities does post-disaster.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gabby Dirden. I am a native Houstonian, born and raised on the southwest side of Houston, Texas. My family did grow up in Third Ward, which is a historically Black neighborhood as well here in Houston. So I call Houston home. It has been my home forever, but I do have a second and third /home. So Atlanta, where the great Spelman College, the best university in the entire nation. So Spelman in Atlanta is home for me as well. And then I have a really close network in New Orleans and very close family friends there. And so New Orleans I call my third home. I've lived in all three at some point. And home to me is also just community. Like the transparency and commitment and loyalty to community. And I really am looking forward to us sharing that this week throughout the conference.
Ryan Morgan, SBP. Home for me is New Orleans, born and raised. I left home when I was 18, attended college at LSU. My wife went to Southern University. And then from there, I was in California most of my adult life with the Coast Guard. Now, Houston is my home, and I cannot be more grateful. Houston is a unique place in the sense that it is huge. It is ridiculous how far you have to drive to get anywhere. However, everyone here is family, and I can honestly say that. I have friends and family here who went through Hurricane Harvey, and the amount of community togetherness that was displayed there was exemplary. And I can appreciate that being from New Orleans, where we are a super small community. Maybe it was 500,000 before Katrina, now it's like 250, 300,000. So I'm happy to be here, and thank you for having me.
Well, thank you all for that. And that just gives you a little bit of context about who's going to be up here and kind of where they're speaking from. So to get us kicked off, we're going to start with Gabby, my CARE colleague.
All right, let's get it rolling.
So CARE has built the majority of its work based on community partnerships locally and globally. Can you give us some insight into why CARE chose to work in the U.S. and how our team is going about finding and partnering with other organizations?
That's a great question, Ladarian. So I'm not sure if all of you know CARE's background, and I know that Amir will get into that later on, but we typically have been working internationally. As a result of COVID, we started a domestic COVID-19 relief program, which was deemed the Care Package Relief Program. And that's how we first started our work in the United States, responding to a natural disaster and a natural emergency. We did have a little bit of context and history to build on, since CARE was the originator of the Care Package after World War II. And so literally our domestic response started with a care package in the United States We partner with local organizations, sought them out to make sure that we were really serving those communities that were underserved, that faced any food security issues, any issues with getting like masks and things of that nature. And that's how we started in the US, creating those care package relief boxes, partnering with local orgs so they can get them out to the community. And then we kind of saw the need change a little bit. Why not focus on doing work in our own backyard? We're so great and we are excellent at supporting international crises. Why not focus on supporting those right here in your own backyard? And so the way that we've kind of gone through looking at partners and selecting them this time around is really trying to focus on those that are BIPOC led, that are locally led. So not the national organizations like Red Cross and FEMA, but those organizations that are really, that not only like represent their communities, but can directly impact the communities that they're working in as well. And so some of it is like relationship building, community and trust. Establishing a network and contacts with people. And some of it is just good old fashioned cold calling. And just picking up the phone, sending an email, asking individuals if they want to be a part of our network, explaining our story, making sure also that we are not exploiting any of the community stories. I think that's very important in the work that we do. And so that's kind of how the need grew.
Yeah.
How we established it.
And I was lucky enough to be a CARE when Gabby was still just a consultant with us. And I remember the CARE Package Relief Program rolling out, and we did a lot of work at first around like food assistance. So I do have a question for Rhonda. So Catholic Charities Family Assistance Program is like a great example of partnerships. In particular, you all have 3 regional food pantries that you offer in-person appointments to and drive-bys as well. Can you speak to us a little bit about how you all run and navigate that food assistance program before and after a disaster strikes?
So I'll just start with COVID. COVID was probably the worst disaster of them all. And unfortunately, each one of us experienced it in some way or another, whether by the loss of family, the loss of resources, the loss of a job, or the reduction of hours that a person would have to work, especially people in the food industry. And so Catholic Charities never stopped working. And we had a staff of probably at that time about 400 staff. But then we had to grow, and we did not lay off one single person. We figured a way on how to distribute food and increase our safety measures so that we could serve each person that came to us. It didn't matter what kind of car they drove. It didn't matter, nothing. Nothing mattered. It just mattered that they drove up and they said, and today, I have a need. I'm hungry. That's all they needed. That's all we need to know. That's all we need to know. Because some people might think, oh, it's Catholic Charities. Do I have to be Catholic? And no, we're not going to ask for anybody's Catholic passport. But that is a misnomer. Across the country, we have 167 partner or sister organizations across the country. And in every community, there are a few people that think, oh, I have to be Catholic in order to receive services. No, because our primary principle is the life and dignity of the human person. So we see a face. We see the eyes of those in need. And if we have the program to serve them, we're going to serve them. But then it's holistic, because after a disaster, there is mental health services, right?
Absolutely.
So we collaborate with other organizations, not just at Catholic Charities. We have a mental health services program, but capacity is limited, right? With human resources is limited. So we partner with other organizations to say trauma-informed care is something essential. It's becoming more and more part of our dialogue. So we have in the Archdiocese of Galveston, Houston, it's regional. So an archdiocesan region is regional, and we have 10 counties within that region. So you think Houston's big, the archdiocese is bigger. And so we have a Beacon of Hope Isle market in Galveston on the island. We go there for recreation because it's the beach. It's not like California, but it's the beach. And it's still the coast. But then there's a lot of poverty on that island. And we say, when we do our food distributions, we are giving them the opportunity to choose for their own families, for what we have in that market. And there's fresh food, there's fresh meat, there's fresh vegetables, there's stuff on for the dry goods in the center aisle, just like a grocery store. Same with Fort Bend County. People can go, and that's primarily servicing seniors, where seniors, if you talk to an older person, they're going to say, oh, my baby's forgot about me already. They will say that because sometimes babies move away, or their friends and family have died off. But they get to come, and there's a community center there. They can have congregate meals, and they can go grocery shopping and exercise. And at the Houston office, we are landlocked, right? In the East End.
Yeah.
Did you see what they did over on the East River?
Yeah.
So at East River, where our center is at the edge of the East End, right across the way from Minute Maid. And so we're landlocked, so there's no access to parking. And so people come up and we have a food distribution twice a month and then during the week. And so we don't just serve people who are in cars, but there's a homeless population, a dense homeless population in that area who live along the bayou. And they're hungry too. They get hungry too. And so we serve them too. And so we don't say, oh, if you're documented or you're undocumented or you're this or you're that. I'm a person, I'm hungry, I need food.
Thank you for that, Rhonda. And thank you for bringing up COVID too. I think our conversation today is very much based on natural disasters, environmental disasters, but COVID is another disaster that we saw, right? That brings the same type of issues as other disasters. One thing in particular I think we focus on a lot are the issues that people can see, right? The food, the shelter. But another issue is around mental health. That's why I wanted Nicole to really be a part of this conversation. Nicole, can you talk to us about how to continue a conversation around mental health, something that people don't see as easy as you needing shelter or needing food, and how you all lean on partnerships to help get information out to the community after disaster hits?
Okay. So some mental health is, we should be taking care of it all the time, regardless of disasters or whatever. And I think that's a lot of what our organization does. We're trying to be on the top end of the preventative part, like what to do, what to recognize. So being informed, I think, is really important. Having advocates for mental health and to understand that it's going to present differently in different bodies. We talk about the BIPOC community and things like that. And so we understand that people are marginalized or seen a certain way. We perceive that mental health looks a certain way. And so I think that's part of, we have to get out of that stigma. So that education, advocacy, and some of the things that you want to do when you're partnering is to, once, I think Gabby mentioned it, see about the people that are there. What do they actually need? Because sometimes we want to rescue and we want to help with what we think people need, but we haven't listened to what the people actually need. So making sure we're going into those communities, not just when they're in trouble, but make sure they know your face in and out. So being more consistent in the communities that you want to help with getting to what they actually need and finding that partnership, because we don't necessarily provide counseling and therapy services, but we're connecting people in the community with where they can go to receive those services. And besides the mental health aspect of recognizing if you start to feel this way or you notice this symptom and it's lasting for this long, you can give them that information. And really it's about connecting them with resources. If you feel like, oh, I'm fine, nothing's happening, but over time, we start, as the the anxiety starts to settle and you kind of have to start moving on, it's kind of like, well, something is going on here. I don't know what I'm feeling, et cetera. And so how do I kind of reach out for those help and services, or even for my loved ones who may not want to reach out for helps and services? So I think being informed, having some training, and definitely having advocates for folks, and being a face in those communities so that you just don't seem like some stranger, like, hey, you wanted this? You know what I mean? So just being there consistently.
And I know that you all have a full kind of timeline of how you roll services out, right? A pre, a during, and a post. I think sometimes too, when we talk about disasters, we get really, really hyped up in that first kind of 30-day after, maybe after something happens, how we respond, right? But typically when a disaster hits, it's not over within a month or two, or 3 or 6 sometimes, right? I mean, Katrina is still up in our heads, right? And New Orleans will never be the same. So I want to direct this question to you, Ryan, and talk a little bit about like long-term recovery. So SVP looks to shrink the time between disaster and recovery and has 5 interventions, which is to build, share, prepare, advise, and advocate. How do partnerships play a role in all of these interventions? And can you share an example of an intervention that SVP has done in partnership with another organization to build community resilience?
So just a little background information. SVP started shortly after Hurricane Katrina in 2006 by a lawyer and a school teacher who were down in New Orleans volunteering in St. Bernard Parish. That's what SVP stands for. St. Bernard Parish. It's called the St. Bernard Project. And they saw a drastic, glaring need to get people back in their homes quicker. Part of the mental health issue is that people, while they're navigating FEMA processes and trying to figure out how to get back into their home, they don't have a home to go to. So that's where they started. And what we've learned over the years, and that we can probably all agree with, is that long-term recovery is not an easy process. It's not an easy undertaking by any means. You need community collaboration, a whole lot of financial resources, patience, a little bit of luck, community leaders who have direction and goals. SBP can come into a community with our expertise and rebuild a lot of homes. However, we can't be everywhere at once. Imagine a small organization like us based out of New Orleans coming into Houston with 100 staff employees and 50 volunteers trying to rebuild all the homes after Hurricane Harvey. It's not going to happen. But what we can do is share our best practices, share our resources, share our money, share our trainings with the local community partners to multiply our output. We do this fairly regularly. One of my favorite programs that we have is our disaster assistance program, where we basically go into a community and help them through training and direct assistance, fill out their FEMA applications, train local organizations, and help the impacted residents. They started shortly after 2021. To date, we have about $4 million awarded to communities throughout the United States. There is no way that we can do that on our own. We need strong local leadership to help facilitate these things for us. Through time, we develop these partnerships and we're able to implement these programs with greater ease, therefore increasing the overall impact of our programs. And we do this with every program that we have.
Thank you for that. So let's keep going on partnerships. I'm going to pull Gabby back in. So for you all who might not know this, the CARE US programs team is fairly new. It's only been around since 2019, so we're year 5 right now. We've been taking kind of global solutions and adapting them here to the United States. And like I mentioned earlier on in the conversation, CARE historically has always built partnerships in whatever community they're working in. So for you, Gabby, since we are still a new team, haven't had too much kind of hands-on in the community, can you speak to us a little bit about the multiple ways that we use transformative partnerships in our community to make a difference? And can you give us a good example of one partnership that you've seen CARE build and how that partnership looks now?
Oh, one? Okay.
Right, so many, I know.
I'll give you two really quickly. Okay, so first, I mean, there are a couple of people I'll call out here and I don't think they'll mind.
I see one.
So Pastor James Lee at Bethel's was extremely instrumental and our response efforts for the winter ice storm. Like, y'all know Houston, you feel the heat and the humidity and the stickiness now. We are not used to ice at all. We were very much so underprepared. The devastation was very impactful across all counties in Houston, Texas. And the way that Pastor Lee and Bethel's team was able to rally and set up distributions so quickly after the storm hit. We also, who you guys will meet later on, Bianca Oviedo, she's our cash assistance manager. Cash is one of those tools that CARE uses globally and domestically, and we give unconditional cash. So we not only had her support coming in to provide cash cards for victims of the winter storm, but Pastor Lee and the Bethel's team hosted distributions weekly for those that could come out and really help them to get the goods that they needed, whether or not it was tarps, cleaning supplies, food, water, like blankets, items for babies. They were so instrumental in getting the relief out to the community as soon as possible. So that I'm very grateful for the Bethel's partnership for sure. And then I would be remiss if I did not mention DSCEJ. So DSCEJ is the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice based in New Orleans. And they have worked with us on several different emergency response efforts. I would say the one that was the most impactful to me is we had, DSCEJ has a proprietary training that they give out, and it's mostly for women. And they do muck and guck response after an event like a hurricane. They train these women, they go out to the community, help with the cleaning and everything, and then try to assist them also with long-term employment. And so they not only helped us do that in New Orleans, but we took them to Louisville, Kentucky, and they helped us do it when we responded to the tornadoes. Then we took them to Arkansas because Arkansas, Jonesboro, Arkansas, still had some damage from the tornadoes that affected Kentucky as well. And we trained women there. So that, I think those two are that stand out to me. And it really speaks to how transformative our partnerships really are, and how when you build these relationships with people, we're able to pick up the phone and call or send an email and say, hey, we not only need help here in Houston, but we need help in Arkansas or Louisiana. Like, can we count on you to be there as well? And so having the commitment of those partnerships and the expertise of those partnerships was extremely invaluable.
So I definitely knew that that's the two that you were going to call.
You did?
So yes, love the partnership with Pastor Lee and DSCEJ, but want to go to the DSCEJ one. I thought that was one of the coolest partnerships we ever had. Yes, I went to all women's school, so I think anything that women do collectively is always really cool. So I'll preface by saying that. But I thought it was so interesting to have women go into homes and actually help find mold and like get it out. I think housing is one of the most important pieces of after a disaster happens, what people need first. Because if you don't have anywhere to sleep or live or cook, you can't really focus on a lot of other things, right? So I want to put this question over to Rhonda. So Catholic Charities does a lot of work in kind of the temporary housing and shelter after disaster happens. Can you speak a little bit more to us about what that process looks like? Do people come to you all and then you help them out? Do you just offer out resources in general? And how do you get the information out to the community so that they know there are resources available for them?
So if you know, well, if you're more familiar with Houston, we don't even wonder if we're going to get a natural disaster. It's just always a win. Yeah. So if you look out that window right there, that would be covered almost to the tops of the trees with some of our floods. So, and that's the truth. Mm-hmm. And so that's one disaster. In May, I'll get to the question because it's on housing. In May, we experienced 3 major episodes.
Yeah.
May 2nd through the 4th, flooding. We can't really get around our city that well. And we have to drive. We don't have public transportation. We have public transportation and it's good. but we like our own cars. We like our own cars. No, it's really hard to get around because everything is flooded. You can get a small rain these days, and because of gentrification and mass development, the water doesn't have anywhere to go.
Yeah.
That's the truth. But we have a beautiful city, and everybody wants to live here. But so to the point of housing, when people need a place to stay, so we are one of those trusted organizations with the city and the county. And then after every disaster, the city and the county say, okay, well then who's going to be the fiscal agent? And then they'll likely say Baker Ripley Catholic Charities, because we're the two multi-service major organizations for the city of Houston. And so then when we have those resources, and we can dole out resources for them to have a place to stay, and then other resources like food and, but food and shelter, those very basic needs, those very, very basic needs, we are able to help them because of the work that Catholic Charities does and the fiscal integrity that we have.
So I think this conversation too, we're highlighting a lot of kind of how organizations step in and how I do want to pivot just a little bit and talk about how communities can step in and help, how individuals can step in and help. I think we can get lost sometimes in waiting on organizations to come in, but at the end of the day, we're all our own individuals and we can step in and help as well. So I'm going to pivot this one over to Nicole and talk a little bit more about mental health. I think that is one of the topics people shy away from, especially during a disaster.
Right.
Nobody really wants to talk about that during that. But is there some advice that you can give to people who maybe have a loved one or a friend who might be going through something during a disaster, right, where they're worried about food and housing and their job, right, but also their mental health is a thing? How do people have conversations with one another in their community about that being an issue, and how they move forward as well?
So I think one of the things is that if you are already aware of, hey, I know your behaviors, I know your patterns, et cetera, things are going to be kind of erratic, especially after a disaster. But if you start to notice some of these signs and symptoms, maybe they've lost interest, or you hear some of their speech sounds just very down and out over a consistent period of time. So you just want to check in with that person and say, hey, I've noticed over the last couple of weeks that, you've sounded X, Y, or Z. And be reasonable, because if you've lost a lot or, even if you haven't lost anything, vicarious trauma is a thing. So seeing other people go through something also impacts us. So just trying to kind of talk to someone about what you've noticed about their actions, what could be the possible impact, and just checking in with them, and mention, I'm concerned about your mental health as well. Taking care of a this, and a that can feel very overwhelming. How are you dealing? How are you coping? Just to hear some of their coping strategies and skills. Some of it, we might hear some people, they usually maybe numb out, and that can look a variety of ways where they're kind of like maybe just watching TV and I don't care about anything else, and seemingly that they're not really responsive or caring about their mental health or the other aspects of life. But they may just be overwhelmed with all the steps that I need to take. Getting into any type of service takes time. And so we're in an emergency, but the rest of the world is dealing with their red tape, So you can feel overlooked, undervalued, and things like that. So I would say get to know the systems of care that folks are needing and be realistic about that timeline with them so they can manage their expectations. That's a part of, someone mentioned trauma-informed care. That's a part of that. So don't say, hey, it'll be real quick, just sign this form and you're done. Give them the real expectation, and here's what you need, and here's how long, and here's how I'm checking in with you, and things like that. So just be involved with that person. Even if you don't know them, text messages help, or checking back in. And we mentioned long-term care. You want to, don't just for that first couple of weeks, all right, it was great, yeah, you're fine. But then, every once and again, check back in with that person and where they are in their process. And if I can connect you with somebody who will help move the process along, let me, step in here or there. So knowing also what you can do, and not having to feel like you're making false promises with that person or yourself. Because sometimes that can be a lot too. As caregivers, you take on a lot, like I'm going to help and I'm going to help and I'm going to help. And you got to check self also.
Yeah.
So I think those would be some great tips.
Yeah, and I love that. And I think too, it's important to understand us individually, who we are as a person and what we're good at. I think some of us are a lot better probably with speaking to people about mental health and how they're doing and what's going on. Some of us might not be that great. I'm one of those people. I'm not super emotional, don't like to ask questions, don't like to interfere. But what I do think I'm really good at is advocating, right, for different policies. I'm really interested in how legislation can make a difference. So I'm going to bring back in Ryan for this one. So SVP works on some advocacy related topics, right, and legislation throughout the U.S. Would love to hear a little bit about what policies you all are looking at, and also please share with people how they can get involved if they are one of those people who might not be good at having conversations with people about their mental health, but might want to get involved in the legislation piece and make sure there are policies in place to help people post-disaster.
My background is immediate search and rescue with the Coast Guard, amongst other things. And as I've transitioned out of military service into civilian service and learning how the disaster process works, it has baffled my mind. I cannot fathom why we have more computing power in our pocket than we did that put the people on the moon. But when a disaster hits and my house is flooded and I don't know where my documents are, I probably lost my social security number, my birth certificate, my deed to my home, whatever the case may be, I have to fill out an application to get those paper documents sent to me, where I don't know where it's going to get sent because I don't have my home right now. Mail service is not delivering. Then I had to take all that documentation and go apply at FEMA, SBA, whatever the case may be. I might have to fill out an application 10, 15 different times following a disaster while navigating, trying to find work because I may not have a job, trying to put my house back together, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm happy that SBP has introduced to legislation what we call One App. And essentially it is a one-stop shop for all your documentation and all of your paperwork. So Ryan Morgan goes to One App before a storm, or I upload my documents, and then when a storm hits, it sends it out to all these organizations, therefore eliminating time, eliminating frustration, eliminating duplication of benefits, which is always a problem, to SBA, FEMA, so forth and so on. So a Habitat for Humanity, an SBP, a Red Cross will all have my information. And within 10 minutes, I will know what I'm eligible for and what do I have to do next. We could put recovery resources on there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Another major one that absolutely love is our fellows program, where we place a fellow within a local to medium-sized community, and they advocate for the community and accessing federal funding for mitigation, resiliency, and recovery efforts. We piloted it with Kentucky, Louisiana. And so far, for instance, in Louisiana, in Lake Charles, Louisiana, we got about $40 million allocated to Lake Charles for net zero, low income housing, about 505 units, I believe. We have about another 150 million in process, and we're taking this program throughout the United States almost in FEMA cedar zones. Another local program that we have is following a storm. We're training and working with local governments to implement a faster recovery process through our RAF program. We call it a Recovery Acceleration Fund. The Recovery Acceleration Fund basically starts building houses now, and then we get reimbursed on the back end once the federal money happens 2 years later. So instead of people waiting 2 years to get their house rebuilt, they get it rebuilt immediately after the storm, and then we get reimbursed at no cost to the survivor. So as far as what you can do to advocate, talk to your congressman. Call them up, bang on their door, say, hey, they got this great program, SVP, why didn't you vote for it? We introduced it in the 117th Congress, got denied. We introduced it at the 118th Congress. It is now sitting at the House. So call them up and aggravate them.
CARE currently in the U.S., we don't have any advocacy related projects, but we are hopeful that in the next couple of years, as we get our programming underway, we'll start doing advocacy as well. I think it's an important piece for every organization to get into that space in some way. Some are great at leading it, some are great at just being a part of it, some are great at just going to CARE on Capitol Hill. going to some ways we always have room, but just going to Capitol Hill or going to meet their legislators in district as well. So for anyone who's never met their district leaders, Congress people, do it. It's important, at least do it once. It's not as nerve-wracking as you think it's going to be. They're actually pretty personable. They're pretty much people, but they really do appreciate people coming out and speaking to them, right, and having a conversation with them. So appreciate that, Rhonda, too, for asking that question, because I didn't know what the landscape looked like there. So I have one more question to kind of close us out, and then I'll open it up if the audience has questions. So we've been talking about disaster relief here today. Would love to hear from each of you. What's like the biggest challenge you think when it comes to disaster relief and recovery? And what's your biggest hope for that challenge as well? So I'm gonna let you all choose who wants to go first, because I kind of threw that one on you. It wasn't on the script.
That's okay. That's okay. I think I'm sure that all of us will agree it's money. It's always going to be money, because there are people who are struggling just to stay in their homes. And then whenever a disaster hits, then that home insecurity is even greater. And then there's no money, or they have to wait for money. So I'm glad that there's some legislation out there that will help them with their documents, because that is always, but it's, I think that money is the biggest issue. And then, just that hopelessness that people feel, and not knowing. Some people don't know Catholic Charities, or some people don't know other resources out there. So I'm glad that at least in Houston we have United Way. The phone number is easy to remember. It's 211. And so that is like and it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that anybody can call and say what their need is, and be connected to an organization who might be able to help.
I would second that with money, but also layer in equitable distribution of funds and resources, because you can be granted as much money, but if they're not equitably distributed and really distributed to those communities that need them the most, then it's not very impactful. And a lot of the communities that need the resources the most don't even know all of the resources that are available to them. That's right. So if we could layer in, of course, getting additional funding, and also just knowledge sharing, and making sure our communities know the steps to go through, know the resources that are available to them. And if they don't, supplying them with advocates that can do the work for them. I would say those are the two most things.
Can I piggyback off that? Yes, funding is an issue. However, I think in 2023, federal dollars was like $500 billion distributed. So their money is there. There's plenty of money. I think what community leaders need to focus on, local governments need to focus on, is how to properly distribute that money to where it actually moves the needle forward. A community that shall not be named, following a flood and massive power outages, instead of thinking about redoing the infrastructure to their power grid, or flood mitigation efforts like levees or floodplain restoration, they bought everybody standalone generators. When the next flood happened and the generators didn't do anything, now what do? So you just spent hundreds of millions of dollars on generators that actually doesn't stop the flood from happening, nor prepares people properly to be resilient when that flood happens. One of my colleagues, his running joke is, it is my life goal to turn a place where the residents were living that was in a flood-ridden area to turn into a golf course and move them to a better place that has higher ground. But you're gonna need innovation like that to move the needle forward. You can't just keep putting a Band-Aid on it with a little bit of FEMA money, insurance money, training. It has to be more at a government level that says, okay, we need to think 50 years, 100 years down the line, and not just tread water right now.
No pun intended.
We do enough trade water.
I'm going to hashtag retweet with all of the things I said. And I think in addition to all of those changes or shifts, I think, so that means having people who know the community and advocating for those communities and showing them what that advocacy looks like. What is the power that they actually do have? What resources are available to them, either pre, during, or post. So do we have a preparation plan? Do we have a disaster plan in this household or in this neighborhood? Do we know what to do? So having those measures. And then one thing that Gabby mentioned was the distribution of resources. I think there's also access to resources. A lot of times we're like, if you're hungry, you'll come here, and just assume that you'll just pick up and go. But what if I am the only person in my house that can take care of all the people that are here? How can I leave and go stand in a line for 12 hours? That's the decision that I'm at. I leave and trust that whoever is here can take care of it, or I can go stand in this line, or I can stay here where I know everyone is safe and I'm safe. So I think it's also making sure we're providing realistic accessibility to those resources that we want folks to have. Maybe we need to bring it to them versus telling them, you come to us. Yeah, so I think that's some things we could do to shift.
It's really like meeting people where they're at.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Real.
So that's all the questions that I have, but I do want to open it up and see if there's some questions from the audience. We have about 5 or so minutes, so would love for you all, feel free to stand up, say your name, what organization you work for, and ask your question.
So the question that I want to talk about is, I appreciate the highlighting of advocacy and people being able to advocate for themselves. Ryan, you mentioned, there's money out there, but it's not being distributed properly, so to speak. My question for y'all is there any part of your work that is connecting those realities of who's elected to how things are being distributed, right? Because it sounds like a lot of us focus on either or. We're focused on getting the resources or distributing the resources. But if our people don't realize that who you elect matters and you getting a generator or new levies, then we're just going to keep recycling this process over and over. So my question to y'all is, do you, in any of your capacities, work on educating the people on how elections or who is elected will have an impact on how they're able to get or receive the resources they need? And if not, is that something y'all are thinking about doing in the future?
So I think that Ryan and I do a lot of that because we are connected to our local, our state, and our federal officials. And that doesn't always mean that we're having conversations with the officials themselves. We talk to the staff because they're the ones who have the ear and they're the ones who are writing the bills. And so whenever we have those personal, actually they're more personal relationships. And then we say, we are here, we are advocating for our community. So for Catholic Charities, there is a document, it's called Faithful Citizenship. And it's published by the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. And it talks about how do you examine your conscience whenever you're going to the election process? What does it look like whenever you go? What does it look like after you hit that cast ballot button? And what does it look like after? Are you holding those legislators accountable to what they said that they were going to do? Because we are the constituents. Say this with me. I'm a constituent.
Constituent.
You're a constituent of a federal senator, of a federal representative, of a state senator, of a state representative, of your city council members, of your county commissioners. You are the voice for the voiceless. And whether your job is part of being a government relations person, you are a what?
Constituent.
And you call that person, or you call those folks and you say, I'm a constituent in your district. That means I voted for you, whether I did or I didn't. I'm a constituent of your district, and I would like to have conversation with you about what your clients at your organizations are encountering. How do you give power to those people? Because some of those people don't feel like they have a voice. But then there's community organizing, but that's a whole other ball of wax. But yes, we all have that opportunity to vote, to find out who we're voting for, but to hold them accountable once they're in office, whether we voted for them or we did not, we are still their constituent. And there are people in our communities who don't have a voice. That's the reality, especially in communities of color. And then our neighborhoods are being gentrified, and we are being pushed out, and we don't know where to go. And I say we because Houston, we are a pool of different and many voices, diversity, and all different peoples of color. And everyone deserves the same equity, right? But unless we hold our legislators accountable, then we're not doing anything. So faith without works is dead. And we all know the story about the babies in the river and who's throwing the babies in the river. Y'all heard that parable? And are we the people who are going to pull the babies out of the river? Are we going to be the ones going up the river and trying to find out who's throwing those babies in the river? And so we're one in both. We have to be one in both. We have to identify those issues that are impacting communities and go upstream and say, state senator, legislator, elected official, how can we make change happen for the positive, for equity, and just even a distribution of dignity to all people.
Brenda and I work with the Community Foundation of Northwest Mississippi, and we run the nonprofit and volunteer resource center that serves 11 counties in the Mississippi Delta region. So my question is, one of our roles is working in those communities, helping our nonprofits be advocates for themselves and to be prepared in blue skies for emergencies, and how their role kind of plays into that when that community is affected by a flood or tornadoes like we've recently had and so forth. So Ryan mentioned that SBP does some disaster training. Do you come into communities in the blue skies to do that type of training?
We can,
We could
yeah.
partner with you to do that more, because that's something that I think would be very beneficial for
So-
our region for sure, doing stuff like that.
So we have what we call Regional Recovery Acceleration Week, or RAW. This is following a storm, a disaster, where we bring in the community leaders, government leaders, so forth and so on. We go through what we call Recovery 101. We cover insurance. We cover our FEMA assistance program, preparedness, as well as advise government leaders on how to actually handle the money they're about to receive and make sure it's distributed equitably. On the front end, we have a preparedness program where we will fly someone in or do it virtually. And it's not just like make sure you have bottles of water, make sure you have batteries, that kind of training. It's like how to properly set up your insurance, where to find shelters following the storm, documentation that you need to have on hand with you when you evacuate, that kind of thing. And I'll be happy to connect you with our partner, Helen. She's great.
Thank you for that question, because I think that just shows to everybody the power of partnerships right there, right? Saw a connection happening. So our panelists have shared some amazing insights with us, and I hope that everyone can take some of this back to their communities and share out with them as well. We all know that climate change and natural disasters are here to stay, but I think conversations like these, give us hope about communities and how we can build communities and build resilience in them as well. So I hope you all enjoyed today's conversation, and join me in giving a round of applause to our speakers.
Thank y'all.